to this topic, and it's the topic of transformation. It's for those people, and a lot of us reach this level where we want to make a change. In fact, there are things that we wish that we could be and things that we wish that we could do differently, but it feels like it's such a difficult thing to do. It seems like such a long road, and it feels like this far off place that we can't reach. And just the idea of how to get there. How do I get from where I'm at right now to where I want to be? And that's basically the question that we're going to be discussing today. And inshallah, a little bit later in the show, I'm going to open up the phone lines, and I want to hear from you guys. So inshallah, stay tuned for that. Basically, what I want to give today is a combination of theory, a combination of, the understanding the idea of change and the idea of transformation, along with specific action items that we can do in order to really transform ourselves and our lives. Now, to begin with, the very first step in any kind of transformation, in any kind of change, has to be internally with your intention. So a lot of people actually have part of this down, where internally they have a wish almost, and it's a wish to be better. It's a wish to change their life. It's a wish to turn things around, to get closer to Allah. Inside there is this desire to be better and to be more devoted to the deen, and yet there is no, it hasn't been actualized. And so the question is, how do we move from that wish to actualization of that wish? So at the beginning, it has to be there. It begins with an intention. And what I mean here is a firm truthfulness of the heart, where you say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you want to change, that you want to be better, that you want to get closer to Him. Now that's really where it begins, because here is where you see the difference in outcome. That the one who has that really sincere decision, basically it's a movement of the heart. This is before the actual, actions come, but just internally, that you see the person who really makes their heart is truthful, has sidq, is truthful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of wanting to change, and is sincere in that. And you will find that if we do have that you will see that transformation happen, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it easy for you if you start with that sincere intention. So the beginning step is that intention, is that truthfulness with Allah. And I would say even turning it into an action where you make dua. So you begin with a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He helps you to make this change in your life, that He enables you to turn away from the sins that you're committing. So if you're living a certain type of life right now, there are sins that you're living, and there are habits that you have, and you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for you to leave those sins, to break off with those things that you're doing that are displeasing to Him. So you start with that. You start with that dua. And then I actually would say that you take it even a little bit, another step, because what happens is we sometimes have like these sort of bursts, internal bursts of motivation. And we say, you know what, I really want to change my life. I really want to come back to Allah. And then we don't act on them. So what happens is, after a little while, it goes away, and we go back into our normal routine and our normal heedlessness and our normal circle of friends in our life, right? And so the key is that you have to act upon that burst, that burst of motivation at the moment that you're in it, that you have it. So when you feel that sincerity, and you feel that truthfulness that you want to change, and then you make that dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then you make an action. You somehow act on that. So the first thing that I mean, personally, what I did when I was going through that point in my life where I wanted to make a change, where I wanted to devote my life to trying to be better, and taking a different path than the path that I had taken. And what I actually did, because I was afraid. that that moment of, like spiritual high or iman rush, would pass, and then I wouldn't make the change that I hoped to make at that moment. So what I did is I tried to sort of trick myself into having to do it, by making a promise. And you know how, you can make a promise to a person, and it's a little bit easy to break that promise. But what I did, to sort of force myself, or to kind of trick my nafs in a way, is I made a promise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I would do, there were certain things that I made a promise that I would do, and certain things that I made a promise that I would stop doing. And by doing that, I was trying to keep myself, so that if I go back to my, my regular routine, that I would remember, even if I wanted to, slip back into my old habits, that I would remember that I had made a promise to Allah. And you can't break a promise that you make to Allah. It's a lot harder. So because of that, you make that promise, and then you feel like now, you need to stick to it. And in fact, that's exactly what happened for me personally. So I made that promise, and, that promise might be, and each person is different. Everyone knows what it is in their life that they need to change. And for some people, it might be a promise to never miss another prayer. Maybe someone is struggling with salah, that they're not praying regularly, and this is actually a major sin, to be not praying regularly and on time. So maybe their promise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be that they will never miss another prayer, and that salah will always be a priority in their life. And for other people, maybe that promise will be that they're going to start wearing hijab. Or maybe if they have taken off the hijab, they'll put it back on. And that they're going to, inshallah, and they ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for them to put it back on, or to put it on for the first time, and to stick with it, inshallah. For other people, it might be a promise that if they're in a haram relationship, that they're going to break off that haram relationship. And these are all, when we get into the realm of these things, these are sacrifices. And we know from the Prophet ﷺ that any time we sacrifice for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever it is that we sacrificed, Allah will replace it with something better. And we have to know that with firm faith, that when we do give up something for the sake of Allah, this is not taken lightly by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we need to remember that, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says that that you will never reach piety, you'll never reach righteousness. وَلَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرُّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ, which means that you won't reach bir and this righteousness, this piety, this goodness, until you're able to give from that which you love. So here, it's not, if you're just giving from something you don't really care about, if you're sacrificing from something you're not really attached to, or you don't, it's not hard, then it's not really a sacrifice. And in fact, it's not really, it's not elevating and purifying you in the same way that if it's something that you really love and something that you really want. And when you give up something that you really love or something that you really want for the sake of Allah, the result of that is something amazing. That result is so much higher. And if you think of even the example of fasting, the example of fasting is exactly that, because when we fast, what we're doing is we're giving up what we love. We're giving up food, we're giving up drink, we're giving up intimacy. These are all things that we love, and in fact things that we need, that our body needs. And yet we choose to give up those things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you look at the reward for fasting, you see that it's unlike the reward for other acts of worship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that for fasting, He rewards for it in a very special way, unlike other acts of worship. When you think of other acts of worship, there's some share for the person. Maybe it feels good, or maybe they enjoy it. But with the fast, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the reward is from me, that I will reward the fast. That He says that other acts of worship are for the worshipper, but the fast is for me, and I will reward for it. And when you look at even the reward for fasting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, comes at 2 times. It comes in this life when the person breaks their fast, and it comes in the hereafter when they meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this can be extended to really any sacrifice that you make for the sake of Allah, where you put what Allah loves over what you love. And anytime you make that sacrifice, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards greatly for that. In fact, one of the people who are shaded in the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when there is no other shade is the one who is tempted towards the haram or having a haram relationship and doesn't give in to that because of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is specifically one of those people who are given this amazing reward of shade on the Day of Judgment. So we should, if it's something that's difficult for us to do, we realize that the more difficult it is, inshallah, the higher the reward is. And what happens once you make this decision and you make this promise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now if you are truthful and if you are sincere in that, Allah will now make your path towards what you have intended easy for you. And that's what's amazing about taking this first step towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Allah says in the Hadith Qudsi, whenever someone takes one step towards Allah, Allah takes 10 steps towards them. And if you come towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala walking, Allah comes towards you with speed. So if you take that first step, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will indeed make it easy for you. Inshallah, we'll take a short break right now, and when we return, we'll